Okay, so we're going to go super experimental today. I've got Bluebell Woods and I have got a blob of acrylic on a piece of, this is a laminating sheet, but anything that is flat that's plastic should do the job. Now I happen to have a handy roller. It doesn't matter if you haven't got a roller, you just basically want a thin layer of paint on the sheet. So you could use a decorating brush, you could use a decorating roller. The thinner you can get it, the better. So I'm just going to keep going over. You could use a glass surface as well if you wanted to. If you've got a loose sheet of paper, that would work, because I'm trying to still use my block because I want to use watercolour as well. I'm trying to get the best of both worlds here. If you haven't done any printing before, it's really fun. I'm hoping we'll be going back to class soon, so this sort of stuff's quite easy to do when you're at home. It's not so easy to do in class. Okay, so I've got a fairly good layer there. What I'm going to do, turn this over and pop it down. Now, it's an A4 sheet, so I'm not going to cover everywhere with it. Actually, it doesn't matter what colour acrylic paint either. It's entirely up to you what you want to use. What we're going to do, we've got a biro, and we're going to come in and we're going to create some abstract lines. So we're just going to draw in like we would normally draw in, and start to get some texture appearing. And then we're going to work, when this is dry, over this with the watercolour. You can get some trunks in, great. Wherever you're touching with the pen, that is obviously going to be bringing the ink, and the paint onto the picture. And then there's going to be a bit of a relief from the paint going onto the picture as well. So you're going to get two sorts of texture happening here. If you want to use anything else to pop some texture in, you can do. I've tried to keep it simple by just using the pen. But a thicker implement will give a thicker line. You can even use things like your fingernail just to get some different. So I'm going to use my little fingernail and just pop in a few extra lines. In fact, I could just smooth across a little bit in places, and then I'm going to peel. Okay, then we're going to come further down. So I want a little bit more down here, pop it back on. I just want to get in a few more of these leaf shapes. To help connect that through. You can even draw a few sort of little bluebelly bits. to start to get that shape appearing in places. I'm going to take that off again. I've got a little bit more texture there. Whilst it's still damp or wet, just with a brush and some water, I'm going to come in and just start to blend a few bits. I started with one idea and now I'm going to expand on it. Just because I don't want all this to be quite as hard. I like the texture in places. I would also like to pull this a bit further. So because you're working with the acrylic and you're working quite quickly, you'll find that it will just still be wet enough for you to do it. If it isn't, you obviously can't do it, but it's not essential. I'm just trying to give a little bit of difference in tone really. I like some of the texture that I'm getting and I want to extend some of this out as well. So just add in little bits of water. Just to break this up a little bit, especially this top section. It's giving us a nice textural base for us to come into later. So I'm really coming behind the tree trunks that I've placed in, just to soften that in a little bit. Just create a little bit of a flow where these bluebells might be. You don't want to lose all the texture. The texture is the beautiful thing of this. It might not seem it at the minute, but it will do as it comes together. Okay. Blending in a few little places. I want it to feel like it's a whole picture. So that's what I'm trying to achieve by blending this out a little bit. That I've not got too much white just in one place. But if I can just add some water, I'm just running this down a bit. That will work quite nicely for creating more branches. Okay, so I'm going to let that one dry now. Okay, so I've got some cobalt blue, sap green, a little bit of sepia ink. You could use sepia watercolour as well. And I've also got some copper bronzing powder. If you haven't got the bronzing powder, it's not an essential. So don't worry. I'm going to come into this background section now. So this acrylic's all dried. Put some water on. I'm going to come in with a little bit of cobalt blue to start with. And we're not trying to eliminate the ink, the acrylic, we're just trying to enhance it now. We want this texture to show through. I'm going to come into the sap green. You're looking where this distant foliage is, and also where there might be some closer green areas, we can pop those in as well. I'm going to twizzle around just because it's easier to paint downwards to create these trunks. And we're going to start to come in now, start to create some of these bigger trunks in here. You want to try to not eliminate all of the texture that you can see. What you'll find is if you go lighter in places, it will still show through, and it works really nicely. I'm just cutting through that bottom line, just so they're not all the same length. Let's get my spritzer and just just going to spritz that bottom edge, just so that it's not too sharp. Start drawing in. You can have a little play with your powder. You can get some onto the trunks, that would work quite nicely. If you haven't got the powder, you don't need to worry. Wherever you hit and where it's wet is where it's going to stay put. Okay, I'm going to dry that one off. Okay, so I've just got some Winsor Violet or Dioxazine Violet on my brush now. I'm just going to start to come in, capture where these bluebells are forming. This background area. To go in nice and strong. So plenty of colour. If we don't get enough colour in now, then it won't work against the pink. You've got to be bold when you're going a bit abstract. You've got to have that boldness there to work against. So I'm just dabbing in, just picking out purple areas at this stage. Come back in a bit later when that's dry. Okay, and dry that one off. Okay, so that's dried off now, and I'm going to come in now with a little bit of sap green. So this is all on to dry, so it's very different to how we'd normally work. I don't want you to come over the violet colour, so I want you to just sort of infill a little bit with the sap green. And I don't want you to eliminate all of the white either. I want you to leave bits of white. So you can be quite loose with it. We're just getting a base on really. Okay, so what I'm doing now is I've twisted around and I'm coming back through to create some more definition in these tree trunks. So with abstract, it's sort of semi-abstract. I want some definition. So I'm using the ink and I'm just starting to bring in some more darkness where these tree trunks are. So I'm using my round number 6, placing it on. I'm not coming too much over the bronzing powder. I don't want to lift all that up, so I'm working around that. But the dark is going to really work to set the boldness of colour. So you're doing an impression of, so it doesn't have to be too precise. You're softening that bottom section. Just a little bit there so they're not too blunt. I'm just bringing a little bit of water in places. You can pull some little bits out. Just so you start to get the effect of branches. And just use whichever brush you feel comfortable with. So this is a rigger. I've used a number 10. You just want the effect to feel like it's trees, wispy trees. So I'm just really just pulling the paint out that's still wet and moving that around a little bit. Okay, I'll dry that off. Okay, so that's drying nicely. Now, you want basically a green, a purple and a white. I have used some FW ink and I've mixed it into watercolour just so I've got that opaqueness. If you haven't got the FW ink, you could try gouache, you could try white acrylic, you could use just normal acrylics and just use a green, a purple and a white. You basically just want something that's going to be opaque to cover over a little bit, so we're going to start to build up some layers. So the green is very, very similar. It's a bit more pastel than the sap green was, but I'm coming in. So I have got a flat. You can see already that it's covering over. And I'm just going to start to build up some foliage. So remember, if you're using acrylic, you need to wash your brush as well. You can still use your watercolour brushes, but you just need to make sure it doesn't dry on them. You can use your round brushes as well. It's not essential you use a flat. It's just the brush that I picked up this time just to break through. You could actually use a sponge as well. A sponge would work really nicely. So this is just bringing in that foliage that we can see. Just keep adding a little bit of water as it thickens up, dries out. It's working over all those darks. It'll be eliminating some of that pink in the background, but we want that pink to show through. That's part of the abstract. So don't eliminate it all. So it's just about creating a really nice balance. Just going to grab number 6 round as well. Just come in a little bit with that. You don't want it to all look exactly the same. When you're using the same brush, you tend to get the same marks. So if you vary the pressure as you're applying as well. This is something that you can take a lot of time to do. It's something you can work quite quickly with. At any point, if you want to change the colour a little bit, then you just add a little bit more watercolour of either something like a blue if you want it a bit darker, or a yellow if you want to bring a bit more sunshine in. Right, just going to add a touch of blue. Just bring in a little bit here. So this is just helping with that definition of line. So I'm just trying to bring out that horizon without eliminating my tree trunks. And to blend that in a little bit. That's help bring out that edge a bit. Give my brush a little bit of a rinse. I'm just going to dab into some white now and just bring little bits as highlights, just in places. So just odd little dabs. And this is just breaking up the green now. It's one of those things you should find quite fun, because the pressure to actually bring something out realistic isn't there. This is just all an impression. It's quite fun to do, really. It stretches your creativity somewhat, but that's a good thing. Okay, I'm going to dry that off. Okay, so now I'm going to start to work into this bottom section. Again, without eliminating. So the first thing I'm doing is coming in with a little bit of the green. I don't want to eliminate all the dark. I don't want to eliminate all the pink. And this is about just getting a synergy through the picture now, so that it starts to connect together. So I'm coming in, I'm using my flat again, but you can equally use a round, not a problem. If you haven't got a flat, don't worry. I'm just picking out green patches. So some of the watercolour from earlier will help with that. And as you come forward, I want you to create more of those sweepy leaves. So less on the flat, more sweeping. And then I'm going to take a bit of extra white in to make it a bit lighter in places. So this isn't pure white now, so this is a mix of the green and a dab of white on the brush. And I'm just bringing that through some of the green that we've done, just so you're getting odd little highlights. So that it's not all the same colour. Okay. Okay, so now I've got the purple. I'm going to start to bring a little bit of that in as well. So this is just dioxazine violet or Windsor purple with the white paint. You're not eliminating, I know I keep saying it, but don't eliminate all of the pink. You want that to show through. You can use the flat for these distant sections, but then as you come forward you want to use the round. You don't want it to have too flat an effect, so you can just dab in. You could use a sponge if you wanted as well. Just dab, 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 lots of dabs. So you can still see that underlying tone of the pink. I want that to show through. I'm just going to dry that off a bit because I'm sticking to it a little bit. Okay, so that's all dried off. I'm now coming in with a little bit of the sepia ink just towards the bottom section. So you can see at the bottom of the photograph it's quite dark. So what I want is to get that darkness appearing. Now, because we're using opaque or semi-opaque paint now, it's nice and easy because we can just slap it on. So I'm just getting these dark bits along this bottom section. And then I'll be able to dry and just come over those. And that's going to give a really nice balance. You need that dark, you need that light in whatever picture. Bring a little bit of dark in here as well. Okay, I'm going to dry that one off. Okay, so that's dry now. I've got the green again, and what I've done is I've just put a little bit of Gambo's yellow. I'm basically using stuff up off my palette into the mix so that I can make this a little bit warmer at the front. And as you can see, as I come over now, I'm going to have that dark behind. So I want you to be quite bold with the strokes now. You can use around number 6, I'm using the flat again, but it honestly doesn't matter. Whichever brush you use is fine. You're just creating these leaves with the dark behind. Doesn't really matter if you go over some of your bluebells that we put in at the very beginning either. That was there to give you a lot of a guide as to where things were going. Remember to vary the height. Some of this is taller and it works quite nicely. Gives a really nice sweeping effect. It'd be interesting to see what you guys make of something like this, because we've never done anything like this before. I'm just going to add a bit of white onto my brush again. So it's not pure white. I'm just picking up a few highlights, especially where these longer grasses are coming through. So that's just breaking up. That's really nicely. Then just bring a few lighter ones through. Just make sure it's not too white. So make sure you've got some of the other colour on your brush when you're dipping in. And then I'm just looking at the balance all the time. I'm looking at the balance. Is there anything that's really drawing my eye that I don't want to draw my eye? Okay, I'm going to dry that off. Okay, so your last one now is to come in with the bluebells. So I've got lots and lots of the purple in the mix with the white, so it's nice and bold. And I'm just coming in and dabbing in shapes. So they're not even a bluebell. I'm not doing a precise shape, I'm just getting dabs in there. Fairly big in the foreground. I can do a few littler dabs in the midground, but just keep. Okay, so I've got those in. I'm just popping an odd lighter highlight in some of the bigger ones. It really is just random dabs. I'm just not going too far back. I've only come to about here. The light's so terrible today to show you. Okay, so I'm going to dry that off really well. Okay, so what I'm doing now is just with the lighter bit of purple, I'm just breaking through the bottoms of these tree trunks a little bit so that they're grounded a little bit more. So I'm just doing some what would be sweepy grasses. I can just add a few more highlights onto the purple in places. It's just one of those things now where you just fiddle in a little bit just to create a bit more balance. So I'm looking at where the pink's showing through in places and thinking, does that work? If it does, I'm leaving it. If it doesn't, I'm adding a tiny bit more. I think the pink in the back is working really well. Okay, what I would like to do now is to add something of a totally different colour. So I am going to choose turquoise. You can choose whatever colour you like. It's another little trick. Just to help it all gel together. So I'm mixing some turquoise with the bit of white that's left on my palette. And we come in and just add a few bits of it. So I'm going to bring it into these grassy bits at the front because I want those to stand forward a bit. So remember that thing we've talked about in the past where if you bring a colour in that isn't in the picture, it creates a focal point. So what I'm doing with this is creating a real focal point, bringing it through at the front. But you need to add it in 3 places for it to work as part of the picture. For me, these grasses that are coming up at the front, they come into 3 places anyway. I can add a few bits within these leaves just to create an additional sort of highlight. And then choosing the boldness of the turquoise has worked because it's going against the boldness of the pink. You have to be quite brave when you're doing things that are abstract like this. And then the other thing that I want to do, which is always hazardous, is a little bit of splattering. So I've loaded my brush. And I'm just hitting onto my finger. I'm not too concerned where the splattering goes. It's quite, apart from going on the carpet, which I don't want it to do. And you can also do that with the purple. I think that would work quite nicely with the purple. So let me just get some purple on the brush. I'm totally using this as an opportunity to really clean my palette today. And you could probably do it with white and it'd work quite nicely as well, if you want a bit of light in. See those splatters. The bigger the brush, the more the splatter. So just bear that in mind. If you want a bigger splatter, bigger brush. Okay, I'm really pleased with that. Hope you've enjoyed it. See you next week.